What is going on, everybody? Week 6 has been a roller coaster of a ride in fantasy football and real football as well. The Eagles lost to the Jets. There's no more undefeated teams. A whole bunch of good teams with good fantasy players are now on bye week going into week 7. We have key injuries to CMC, Deebo Samuel, Justin Fields, David Montgomery, Trevor Lawrence, Kyron Williams, a whole bunch of guys I'm not even naming. This is a very big, crucial week for the waiver wire, so we need to make sure to get it right. And with that being said, you guys know I absolutely hate to waste people's time in these videos, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with the very first player we need to be adding off the waiver wire. And this is probably one of the more significant season-long impact guys of the week, and that's going to be Taj Spears. He's only rostered in 57% of leagues. I've been talking about him for weeks now, so I am going to make it relatively quick. He was rostered in 37% of leagues last week. Now it's already 20% higher. It's going to keep going up. Pick him up if he's on your waivers, please. Let me explain why. I know his fantasy point total last week was not the best, but if we look at his season snap share, it's been going up every single week. And he might not be getting the most carries on those snaps that he's seeing, but he's on the field and he's getting involved. Those will go up. There is just so much potential stuck in him right now. It is going to explode one of these days. And the first point of emphasis for that is that he owns the receiving role. He gets 4 targets a game on average. When the Titans are in 3rd and long situations, he's the guy on the field because they need that receiving upside and big play upside that they just don't get with Derrick Henry because they know they're going to run the ball when he's on the field. He is the guy they go to on 3rd and long situations, and he destroys Derrick Henry in routes run out of the backfield by itself. On top of that, when the Titans are down by a decent amount in games, Taj Spears is the guy that they keep on the field to keep the chains moving and keep the electric high-powered offense going because their offense is not that good and not that high-powered in general, and Derrick Henry just is not that for them at this age anymore. Derrick Henry is getting older as far as running backs go, and once they reach 30-ish years old, fantasy running backs really don't produce that much and be top backs. And Ryan Tannehill is also dealing with an ankle injury from this game, and who knows how long he's going to be out. We do have to wait for more reports on that, but it looks like a decent amount of time. But all of this is combining into one fact that it doesn't look like they're competing for a playoff spot. They are not competitive, and they're dealing with a whole bunch of injuries going into their bye week this week in week 7. And this is why he's such a good ad, because historically after the bye week, teams get their rookies involved way more. There's a real chance that his snap share goes up, and even if his snap share doesn't go up, there's a real chance that he gets more carries on those snaps. Like we said before, he's on the field over 50% of the time, but he's still only getting around 6, 7, 8 carries and 4 receptions a game. That could easily go up. Derrick Henry again is also getting older, which increases the chances of him being injured. So the ceiling that Taj Spears has sitting on the waivers is absolutely insane to me. Get him on your team while you still can. And there is no doubt that he's going to get more involved over the season. It's just how much. Because there is a world where the Titans just are not competitive whatsoever and they sit Derrick Henry and just let it ride out with Taj Spears. By the way, though, if you guys have made it this far in the video, make sure to hit that follow button because you've clearly gotten some kind of information already. And this kind of stuff is dropped every single day on this page. But looking at another guy we need to be picking up off of the waivers, this time a tight end, is Michael Mayer. And this could be a good ad for a lot of you guys because of bye weeks or injuries. And the tight end pool just isn't great, but he is a guy that has a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. This is a guy like Taj Spears that has an insane amount of season-long upside. He will not be startable in your lineups right away, but let's look into it. This is a really interesting guy. Even coming into the NFL draft, he was one of the top-ranked tight ends around guys like Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid. So the potential was always there, and he was going to take some time to get acclimated into this offense, as rookie tight ends do, but he came out last week and saw 6 targets for 5 receptions, seeing a season high of 81% snap share in a game that was competitive the entire way. Can he make the case to be a clear-cut tight end 1 in this team? I definitely think he can, but there are a couple drawbacks we do have to be aware of, and that's why he is a guy that we can sit on for potential. And part of that fact is because Jimmy G is now injured. He left last week's game in week 6 with a back injury, and he was taken to the hospital, so it's pretty safe to say he's going to miss a couple weeks. But keep in mind, he is going through more tests and more news is going to come out, but at the time of this recording, it looks like he's going to miss a couple weeks, but there is no definitive report yet. But the second half of this is that Devontae Adams has been slowing down over the past few games. He didn't get his first reception until halfway through the second quarter last week. He saw 4 targets in week 5 and 5 targets in week 6, and over those 2 weeks he only averaged 30 yards a game. Absolutely terrible recently, not what we drafted him for, which has allowed other guys in this offense to get more targets like Jacoby Myers, like Michael Mayer. But we all have to be realistic and know that's not going to continue. Over time, Devontae Adams is going to go back to his 10 targets a game, and that's going to lower other guys in this offense because they don't have an insanely high passing volume anyways, and they like to run a top heavy offense. Maybe Mayer can become part of that top-heavy group of guys. Who's to say he can't, but that is something we do have to monitor moving forward. But if he can continue to see 80-90% of the tight end snaps, there is no reason we should not be adding him off the waivers. He's showing signs of improvement. The team is trusting him. He's seeing a higher percentage of snaps. These are all things we look for in rookies, especially rookie tight ends, because it is harder for them to acclimate to the NFL. He does have a whole bunch of upside, and you might not be using him yet outside of bye weeks and injuries. But if you have the room to stash him on your bench, if you're a winning team and you can afford holding him and not picking up spot start guys, he is most definitely a person to go ahead and add and stash on your bench. But speaking of injuries and bye weeks, if you guys do need a quarterback off the waivers, we need to be going through and adding Sam Howell. And if you guys watch the waiver wire ads and must start videos, I was talking about him last week as well, but we can continue that here. He is still out there in a majority of the waiver wires in fantasy football. He had 18 fantasy points last week, 26 the week before that, and 19 the week before that. And he has quietly been the QB 11 on the season. And the great thing we have here with Sam Howell, besides all of the passing touchdowns he's had recently, is the sheer passing volume of this offense. If we look at his chart here, he's averaging about 36 passing attempts a game. And this is great to see because more passing attempts means more yards and more fantasy points. And a lot of people will look at this and say, well, this is probably just a fluke. It's the Commanders offense. How good can he really be? But the reason these passing numbers and this volume isn't irrelevant is because this Washington defense allows so much volume over the top. Their defense is terrible against fantasy wide receivers and allows a lot of teams to put up a whole bunch of points on them. That is why they're averaging 30 points a game to opposing offenses. And if you're scoring that many points, you're going to have to pass a lot to keep yourself in these games. They just let Drake London go for 125 yards. They let DJ Moore go for like 500 the week before that, and AJ Brown 175 the week before that. And the list goes on. This kind of performance is not going to slow down. The Washington Commanders have a really tough schedule of great offenses they're facing for pretty much the entirety of the season. So they're going to have to keep up this passing volume every single game if they want to stay relevant, if their defense can't pick it up, which it does not look like it will. I mean, they just benched Emmanuel Forbes for this reason. Now, there is some risk to Sam Howell because at the end of the day, he is a Commanders quarterback. They do have one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. Sam Howell is one of the most sacked quarterbacks. That will lead to more mistakes from Sam Howell, but at the end of the day, he's a waiver wire quarterback. We really cannot be asking for much more than that. So go ahead and add him if you need a quarterback this week, and really for the next couple weeks. He gets a great matchup next week coming up against the Giants. But this would not be a waiver wire video if we didn't talk about Christian McCaffrey and his injury and what that means for fantasy football. For those of you that do not know the specifics, Christian McCaffrey has suffered an oblique injury. Usually for running backs, that's about 1 or 2 weeks they're going to be missing, and that makes Jordan Mason / Elijah Mitchell the starting running backs for that time. But realistically, I think CMC could just miss one game with who he is and who this team is. They are kind of in win now mode. They need to make the playoffs and be the #1 seed. That's kind of what they're going for. But let's say Christian McCaffrey is going to miss 2 weeks, which is very, very possible. They're going to have their bye week in week 9, and he probably won't be seen till week 10, and that's a pretty decent amount of time. But regardless of how long it's going to be, if it's 1 week or if it's 2 weeks, the guy we need to be adding off of the waivers is Elijah Mitchell, not Jordan Mason. And I know this might seem like a hot take to some people because last week we see Jordan Mason lead the backfield. He led 24 snaps to Elijah Mitchell's 10, but this really doesn't mean anything, and it sure doesn't mean that Jordan Mason is going to be the RB1 while Christian McCaffrey is out. Regardless of Mason seeing twice the amount of snaps and time on the field, there was still only a 2 or 3 carry difference between the two running backs. And the reason I think Mason is not the add here, it's going to be Elijah Mitchell, is because he's been involved earlier in the season and previous years before this. The main fact here is that Elijah Mitchell is coming off an injury that he suffered in week 3, and this game was the first game that he came back from that injury, and when he was healthy, he saw 34% of the snaps in his last game before injury. But for some reason, everybody's forgetting about that and seeing this one game, which is the returning game of Elijah Mitchell from injury, which automatically means he's going to see less snaps anyways, and thinks Jordan Mason is going to be the RB1 or at least the lead running back. It's not going to happen. I expect something around a 60-40% snap share between the two, with Elijah Mitchell obviously leading. But similar to what we were talking about with David Montgomery and this Lions team earlier in the season, Jordan Mason is the bigger back, 5'11", 225. He's going to get a majority of the goal line snaps, and Elijah Mitchell will see everything else in between that. But it's really all going to come down to how much time CMC is missing. They have one of the best offensive lines. Their offense is really, really good. So this makes both of them viable adds. But if I was going to say which one is going to be the more impactful guy, it's going to be Elijah Mitchell, regardless of if he takes a little bit more time to come back from his injury. But looking at another running back here, I was telling you guys to stash weeks and weeks and weeks ago. I hope you guys did pay attention to that video and watched it while you still could, but make sure to have your post notifications on if you didn't see that video so you watch every single one of these and you're not behind. But to set the scene here, Nick Chubb went out in week 2 with a season-ending injury. Jerome Ford came in here and got a majority of the snaps. He saw 100 yards on the ground and a majority of the receiving work, if not all of it. And everybody was coming to me telling me, Avery, he's the next Nick Chubb. We need to be picking him up. He's a workhorse running back. And I was telling you guys, no, we have to wait and really sell high on Jerome Ford if we can. And now that's really coming to fruition. We know that the Browns signed Kem Hunt, and ever since then, Jerome Ford's snaps have been decreasing little by little every week. And this is really important because his snaps decrease even more after their bye week last week. And that's a time when teams make a majority of their changes to move forward in the season. And no surprise to me or you, Kem Hunt saw his season high in snap share of 40%. And in this 60-40 split, he only saw 4 or 5 less carries than Jerome Ford did, and he owned the receiving role. But one thing stats won't tell you is that Kem Hunt started this game and owned all of these short yardage plays. The Browns have one of the better run schemes and offensive lines in the NFL, and they have a pretty decent schedule coming up for fantasy running backs. He's been on the team for years and years and years now. Grab him while you still can. He's only going to get more involved. So you want to get him before it's too late, because the whole point of the waivers is predicting the breakouts before they happen, so you don't have to spend $1 billion fab dollars or all of your priority on him. But moving over to another running back that I am going to cover very quickly, because I feel like I've been talking about him since the beginning of the season. You guys need to pick him up. Please go ahead and do this. Is Roschon Johnson. Khalil Herbert went out in week 5 with an ankle injury and has now been placed on IR. And Roschon Johnson also suffered a concussion in week 5 as well, which made Foreman the lead back for this offense, and everybody kind of forgot about Roschon. But the fact of the matter is, when Roschon likely comes back this week into this offense, he's going to continue to be the RB1 in a great matchup against the Raiders run defense. And I'm really not worried about D'Onta Foreman. There's a reason he's been a healthy scratch the entirety of the season after they signed him this year. Now, coming into these next couple weeks while Khalil Herbert is out, Foreman will still be involved because you need a second running back active. But when Roschon is at full strength, he's going to be the lead guy. And this isn't just a hunch. Earlier in the season, when all of these running backs were healthy, he was getting involved and leading in third down snaps, red zone rolls, and 2-minute drills, everything that's important for a running back. He was also increasing his snap share every single week, and he owned the receiving game. And in all of that time with all of these running backs, he averaged 6 carries and 4 targets a game. He doesn't need this offense to be amazing for him to be a high floor flex guy because of his receiving value. He's got the high draft capital, which is going to weigh heavier than the small Chuck E. Cheese contract they just gave D'Onta Foreman. So there shouldn't be any entitlement in this offense to give him a good amount of snaps or keep him over Roschon. There really shouldn't be any more opportunities to pick him up off waivers after this week. We've been talking about him for so many weeks, and it might now just be the deadline for him, so pick him up if you can. But going over to look at a wide receiver you can add if you're in win now mode, or if you just want a stash guy, is Josh Downs. Besides him grading as one of the best slot receivers in college football, having an elite target share, is again coming into this offense seeing more and more snaps every single week as the year goes on, which again is something we'd love to see with rookies. For a guy that's averaging 10 fantasy points a game, he really should be rostered in more leagues than he is now. But through 4 weeks, he has ran 80% of the routes on this team. And another key note here that is actually really beneficial for him is that he is a positive guy in man coverage, which is very hard for a rookie wide receiver to do. Usually they just sit back and find the holes in zones. But no, he doesn't need those training wheels to excel. In man, as an undersized wide receiver, he is still getting open and dominating. Gardner Minshew is not a downgrade to any of these fantasy receiving options at all. If anything, he's a better guy, and I'll explain why. With Minshew in this Colts offense, they have been way more fast-paced, and they've ranked second in huddle rate and plays per game, which has allowed Josh to run 45 routes last week. When you get that many opportunities, getting 7-8 targets, it really isn't that difficult to do, which is exactly what we saw in week 6, and this isn't a fluke thing that's happening right now. Yes, the Colts were playing from behind a little bit last week, but this is the identity of the team, and it's just elevated now that Gardner Minshew is under center. He's seen a decent target share for a rookie wide receiver on the snap count he's getting now, and that is only increasing, and this offense is only getting more and more opportunities, so he should definitely be a guy to stash on your bench, and you could even possibly use him as a flex play, as a spot start if you do need him coming up. But you guys know me, I like to finish off these videos with rapid fire defenses you can be picking up off the waivers if you do like to stream defenses, because that is my favorite thing to do. And if you guys don't do that, a quick rundown is pretty much instead of sticking with one defense, let's say you have the Cowboys defense, you got to roll through all of their hard matchups against the Eagles, against the Jets, all these really good teams. We just pick up defenses every week that have the easiest matchup, and it grades out higher than just sticking with one defense the entirety of the year. So one defense to stream that you could start this week is the Raiders. They might not be the best overall defense in actual football, but they get a matchup we cannot ignore against the Bears without Justin Fields. Reports came out today that he is doubtful for week 7. He really is not going to play this week, and this team already isn't great. We could also go through and add the Packers defense, who are only rostered in 11% of leagues. So they get a matchup against the Broncos this week, who have just looked terrible. They do not look good at all. I don't know what's going on in Denver. They don't have the best offensive line, so we can lean more into sack opportunities. And now the Packers don't have an insanely good offense, which is going to make Russell Wilson pass a whole lot more and create more turnover opportunities. But from how Russell Wilson has been looking, he doesn't need opportunities to make mistakes, especially when you have Jair Alexander on the other side of the ball. And if you need another defense, you can also look the Seahawks way. They're projected with the highest fantasy points on waivers at least this week. They get a great matchup against the Cardinals. Their offense actually hasn't been completely terrible, but Josh Dobbs does make a decent amount of mistakes himself. Lots of opportunities for fantasy points on the defense there, but that is going to finish off this video of all of the waiver adds you need to make sure to add this week. This is a very, very crucial time, a bunch of injuries, a bunch of bye weeks, so make sure to hit that follow button and stay tuned for all the video.